As Lee stared at herself in her mirror, she tried not to let tears escape her eyes. Her dress was beautiful, with intricate lace detailing and a flowing train. Her veil was delicate and cascaded down her back, held in place by a glittering tiara. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless. This was never how she imagined her special day to be. Lee had always dreamed of her wedding day. She had pictured it to be a fairy tale affair, filled with love and happiness. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, she knew that this was not what she wanted. The dress, the veil, the tiara, and the makeup, it all felt like a mask that she was forced to wear. She didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. She felt like a stranger in her own skin. A few tears trickled down her cheeks as she tried to stifle back the rest. As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, she heard a faint whisper. Suddenly, she felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, causing her veil to flutter. She tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a draft. But then, she heard the whisper again. This time, it was louder. "Lee," the voice whispered. "Lee, it's time. Lee, are you okay?" As she turned around, she realized it was her maid of honor, Jenny, the only one that she actually knew at the wedding. Lee managed a small smile, feeling grateful for her friend's support. She followed Jenny down the hallway and into the wedding ceremony room, where her fiancé and his family were waiting for her. As she walked down the aisle, Lee couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been creeping up on her all day. Finally, she reached the altar where her fiancé, Charles, and his aunt were waiting for her. The aunt smiled at her, a smile she was guaranteed was fake. She flashed a quick smile in response. The wedding ceremony proceeded as planned, but all Lee could do is try to force the tears back. Charles completed his vows, and as she was about to make hers, she knew she couldn't take it anymore. Lee looked at her fiancé and tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She felt a wave of panic wash over her, and she knew she needed a way out of there. She was done playing a role she never signed up for. She couldn't keep up the act. "I can't!" she yelled, bursting into tears. "I can't do this anymore!" she cried out. "What are you doing?" Charles said in a low tone through gritted teeth. "We told you. If you listened to what we said, we wouldn't hurt you," he growled. Lee, turning to the crowd. "Help me, please. These people kidnapped me and they're forcing me to marry him. I don't want to do this. I want to have a normal life. Please, please help me," Lee cried hysterically as she fell to her knees at the altar. There was instant chatter amongst the people in the crowd until the speaking stopped abruptly. "Stop, this instant," Charles demanded. "Guards, she's dismissed." Charles motioned to some people at the back of the church as Lee raised her head to him. "What?" she asked, confused. As Lee turned to face his guests, Lee noticed that many of them were no longer familiar faces of her fiancé's friends and family. They were strangers with cold, emotionless expressions, and she couldn't help but feel like they were all staring at her this way. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the area. The guests' expressions changed. Their eyes had a shallow darkness to them as their mouths contorted into twisted smiles. From the back of the church, she could see two buff men, in suits, walking down the aisle. Lee had never been so frightened in her life. Lee stumbled back, her heart racing with fear. She tried to stand up, but it was like she was paralyzed. As they inched closer and closer, she could see something gleaming in their hands, its sharp edge glinting in the dim light of the church. They were axes. They were holding axes. Lee tried to scream as she noticed, but no sound came out of her mouth. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest and her body shaking with terror, but she just couldn't move. In his eyes, she saw a cold and ruthless determination. She could hear the sound of his breathing, ragged and uneven, as he advanced towards her, the axe held high above his head. As he brought the axe down, she could hear the sound of metal cutting through the air, the whistle of the blade as it came closer and closer to her. The last thing she heard was the axe gauging into her head and feeling a life-ending pain before her body instantly fell to the ground. Lifeless. Charles stooped to her level as he watched the blood pour out of her skull. Her eyes were wide with shock. Her lips stayed open as if she was about to scream. He brushed her hair behind her ear with a sigh. "I warned her," he spoke as he cupped her cheeks solemnly before he stood up. "Bring in the next bride!" He yelled to the guards as he stepped over Lee, walking down the aisle and straightening his tux. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the depths of darkness. This story was a hauntingly beautiful one, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Until then, stay spooked.